Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Millennial Think Tank. And tonight we tackle a subject that I'm sure is going to have a lot of conversation. It's marriage and relationships. So I'm going to give you the background real quick. And I rely primarily on Pew Research because they're the only people I trust to not make gross overgeneralizations. 26% of millennials are married, compared to 36% of Gen Xers and 48% of boomers. And interestingly enough, their research shows that 69% of millennials say they'd like to get married when they have a solid footing, financially and otherwise. So we're going to tackle a lot of interesting topics, but first I'm going to start and have everybody introduce themselves. Albert, I'm going to start with you, just who you are, where you fall into the millennial spectrum, and what you do.
Hi, I'm Albert. I'm one of the single millennials here in this group tonight. I currently work in product marketing for Hewlett Packard here in Silicon Valley, out at their Palo Alto office.
Okay, and Brian? Brian,
Brian
you're
Fanzo,
muted.
Phoenix, Arizona. I don't live in the car, I promise. Uh, I'm digital strategist from a company called BroadSuite with Daniel Newman, Millennial CEO, and I'm currently outside of Apple Store waiting for an iPhone 6.
It's so cliche. Okay, there we go, Essie.
Oh,
Your
okay.
turn.
I'm Hessie Jones. I'm CEO of our company, and Brian's waiting outside the store to get me an iPhone as well.
Because she's too old to be in that line. They kick her
That's
out.
right.
Okay, Joe, you go. Joe, you go.
Joe Cardillo. I'm an older millennial, and I run a journalism startup and also do content and growth with our company team.
Yay, lucky us. Judy?
Hi, I'm Judy. I am an older millennial, and I work in theater. I currently work for Chicago Shakes Theater as a writer, and not writing Shakespeare. And I am not waiting for an iPhone at all, and I'm not sad about that.
But you look fabulous in sepia.
Thank you.
Laura? Laura?
I'm Laura Petrolino. I'm Client Services Director for Arma Dietrich, and I am an older millennial as well, also not waiting for an iPhone, but still very cold in my little house.
Well,
Yes.
we'll find out if you're waiting for a husband. That's what we'll find out, right? Samantha?
Hi, my name's Samantha. I'm a younger millennial at 23, and I am married, and I work in public interest research groups.
Tiffany?
I'm Tiffany Daniels. I'm an older millennial. I am a single millennial. And instead of waiting for an iPhone, I got a new HTC today.
Yay! I love anyone.
I'm giving up the iPhone. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'm okay. So we have a hashtag war going on in the chat with all team married, team divorced, team whatever. I'm team anti-Apple. Just so we're okay. So we're gonna start, and I want you guys all to answer this question, which is gonna take a while. So please do it succinctly. Well, first of all, who's married? Ray, show a hand. Who's married? So we have 2 married millennials, and who minds telling us if they're divorced or not? Is anyone divorced on this panel? Besides me, because I don't count. Okay, and what I want to do quickly, in 30 seconds or less, I'd like you to tell me what you think marriage is. And not necessarily whether you hate it, love it, never want to be it, but how you see it. Albert, I'm going to start with you.
I think marriage is a lifetime commitment with two people who are committing to spend the rest of their life together. I know that's kind of circular.
No. No.
And I think that in order to get there, you really have to be has to be two people who trust each other a lot, who can lean on each other, and are committed to being in each other's lives, and in ways where I think they never seen or understood before. This is a friendship, but it's definitely elevated to a way higher level, and I think it requires a very specific mindset to succeed in.
Okay. All right, Brian, who is married with how many children?
Three kids, married almost 11 years, 11 years next month. But
Wow.
yeah, 3 kids under 5. So I was married for almost 6 years with no kids at the time. But marriage for me is kind of a teammate in life. So managing kids, bills, career changes, laid off twice, moved to 4 different cities. So it's for me, I sum it up as my marriage is definitely my teammate.
I love the car seat in the back too. I'm digging
Yep,
that.
I got all 3 car seats wide in the Honda. That's for sure.
Okay, Hesse, do you want to go for this just to get a Gen X perspective? You can plead the fifth. The question was, what do you define marriage? What do you see it as?
Okay, for me, it started off with friendship, right? Because I don't think you can marry anybody but your best friend. It does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of commitment. I think it's different because my definition probably now is different than when I started out. Because in the beginning, it was a fairy tale. And once you find the right person and everything in your being says, this is the person that's for me, you know, then you go for it. Things change in life, and so like I still believe that marriage is that way. I think it's the right person. I just don't think that marriage is forever, necessarily.
Okay, Sean. Hi, Sean. That's her husband. Joe?
I'll give you a very strict answer. I think that marriage is mostly an economic contract that's misunderstood and poorly written in a lot of cases. But I think that it can be rewritten really well between any 2 people.
Okay. Okay, Jude?
I definitely agree with Hesse. I don't think of it as a fairy tale at all. I think of it as a living, breathing thing you have to put work to, and you know, it does come down to the idea of teamwork, in my opinion. You need a friend, and you need someone that, you know, is okay with cleaning a puke with you at 2 a.m. Both want to just get to bed, and at the same time, still use and, you know, help you be a better person as you push them to. There's my idealistic answer.
Okay, Laura?
I agree with the teammate perspective, and I feel like marriage is a commitment to someone that makes you and your life better in a way that makes it worth all the other crap and stuff that you might have to put up with to go along with it. So it improves your life. It's like a return on, it's got a really good ROI. So it's got a good return on investment. They make you a better person and make your life a better entity, but you know, the good comes with the bad. It's worth it.
Okay. Samantha?
I definitely think that marriage is team-based. I also think it is an economic contract that is used for the betterment of like yourself as a social status. At our wedding, we read from Emma Goldman's anarchist essay on love and marriage about how it's being an economic contract between 2 people, and that unless it is actually made out of like true feelings of love and partnership, then it really shouldn't last. So those are my feelings on it.
Okay. Tiffany?
I can't say that I really have much to add than what the group has said. I think it's both an emotional contract and a financial one. A lot of the times we think about the financial when we're looking at couples that are uncoupling, unless you have the money of the people that say uncoupling, and then it might be a different situation. But I think for me it's important to remember that you should, have the fairy tale pieces. I think that's exciting, but those things fade, and if it's not a person that you want to be with at 2 a.m., cleaning up vomit or working on a new house or anything else, basically if it's someone that you don't want to kill when things are hard, I think that's a good sign. I mean, and I don't mean that literally, but some people get very focused on the exciting pieces and aren't preparing for when life turns into life. And if that person can make really bad times slightly better, then that's probably a good match, at least to continue and consider. And we don't often think about the bad times because that's not fun.
You know what I heard just then, though, is a lot of equality, because if you're teammates, then you're equals. And that is definitely a shift from, at least from my parents' generation. But Samantha, it's interesting that you talked about the economic status. You were saying, let me clarify to make sure I got you right. You were saying that it does help your status, right?
Yes, you can use marriage to, in the society that we live in right now, marriage often leads to upper placement in certain things as long as you're not child rearing. So like for me to say I'm married but not starting a family means that I'm more hireable. If I was saying that I was newly
Where do you
married,
get that from? Wait, where do you get that from, though? What obviously from your experience, but
there's a couple stats I can pull up things to put later into the event thing, but there's actually been statistics done and studies done. Women are less hireable if they're in their child rearing ages because of the mat leave.
no, of course. So that's what I was thinking. You know, when I got hired as a single person, even though I was in the child rearing age, I think one reason they weren't worried is because I wasn't married and it didn't look like I was going to have a kid, and I fooled them all and got pregnant. But I mean, I definitely was feel like my boss actually said to me, and I loved him, and he was crazy and wacky. He said, "You better not get pregnant," in my interview, and he said it to me repeatedly for a couple of years. Don't get now. I mean, he was an insane man who was and totally inappropriate. But I that's interesting. That I would love to see those stats. I was wondering if it was from your experience.
No, it's both. One of the things that I combat it with is that I'm currently a graduate student. So by saying I'm a graduate student in my MA and I plan on going for my PhD, people assume that that means I'm putting my career first anyways.
It's fascinating. So you're actually tactically discussing these things.
Yes.
You just use the word combat it. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Can I say something? I'm just going to give you an overall impression of what I'm hearing right now. It seems very pragmatic. And if you talk to somebody else that takes a more an emotional view about love and this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, the stuff that I'm hearing here, I'm hearing return on investment, I'm hearing teamwork, I'm hearing contract. What does that tell you guys?
I actually thought it was really optimistic.
Well, it's business. Come on. I mean, this is...
because when you're saying someone to be there with you at 2 a.m., that's love. I don't care. When you're saying someone that I'm moving 4 times and I get laid off and there's somebody there, to me, that's love.
Well, and I think there's a byproduct of it too. I can take it.
Is Brian frozen?
18 people.
Repeat yourself, Brian.
No, go ahead, Brian.
Repeat yourself,
Okay.
Brian.
So I took over a team of 18 people, and during the interview of them asking me to take over the team, they said, "Oh, you're married?" And all 18 people were older than I was. So I was 23 years old taking over a new team, and the fact that I was married was definitely a checkbox, but I didn't get married to have that checkbox. I got married right out of college. I actually proposed with the idea of saying, let's have 5 years together and then decide to have kids because we both wanted kids. And for me, it was very much of a honeymoon at that stage. But the financial element came into effect very quickly after the honeymoon starts to wear off, and you have to, those balance. But for me, the marriage checkbox actually, I believe, helped me get that job because I wasn't the 23-year-old crazy person they couldn't trust on road trips, or at least they thought that because I was married. But
yeah, but I get that, and I think Samantha was echoing that too. Judy just said something in the chat. I think the business speak is realism to combat the broken fairy tale concept. If you look generations earlier, when my grandmother got married, people were not really getting married for fairy tales back then. I mean, it was still who's available, who's my age, who has a decent job. It was part of the social structure too. I think it was maybe, are we returning to a more pragmatic view of marriage?
You know what I think the big difference is that in generations it's been more of a very firm part of your life scheme, and it was just assumed. So it was, you do this, or like for females, it was, you go to school, you maybe have an initial job, you get married, you have kids, da-da-da. Or as it's morphed a little bit, and I think now it's morphed to a way that marriage isn't necessarily something that is assumed, it's something that's chosen. And so there's more of an emphasis on making sure that you find the right situation. Like for me, it's I want to find the right situation that makes my life better. So it's not just getting married for the sake of getting married and having that label. And I think that's the big change that you see, and that's why maybe it seems more business-like, because it's a choice. It's like a career decision.
And I come back to the fact that you guys are actually the liberated generation, despite the fact that the debt is crushing you. when I was, you know, those Brat Pack movies were all about despondency and being on this track, and you were stuck, and you had to go in the cubicle, and it was Office Space. If you guys have never watched it, watch that movie. But it was that we were going to have to do all these things. It was inevitable, and you guys don't have that. That's where your optimism comes from. I'm convinced of it. Now I know. Samantha said, our generation is the first one to have more classmates from broken families than parents are together. And that's fascinating to me. I mean, I grew up in a school full of people who didn't have parents, so I don't know what it was like to be the outsider because we didn't have parents. But I know my daughter's 7, and she told, her dad isn't around much. And she said to me, I want to have a normal family because to her friends all have. So I guess maybe I'd love to know the actual statistics on that, but okay, I'm going to move on. Fascinating stuff in the chat. So does anyone here never want to get married? Again, or ever? Hessie, you can't answer that. But so everyone here would like to see themselves married someday. Is anybody iffy on it?
I always think that, I'd like to give I think a few more romantic relationships a try before I decide that marriage may or may not be for me, because I've only had one long-term girlfriend in my life ever here at the age of 26. And it's really difficult to date in Silicon Valley too. And so that in itself is kind of one of those journeys, So there are so many engineering and men here, and people come here to Silicon Valley for careers, and so I almost feel like at some point, once I make my money over here, I should go to somewhere else in the United States so that I can actually live the way that all these people talk about live in terms of getting married and relationships and things like that. So
since they're all these men making lots of money, what are the women doing? Are they making lots of money alongside them? What are they doing?
Yeah, they're making lots of money too. They're taking on, STEM careers, and they're working at Google, Facebook, Apple, here at HP, etc. And it's just you go out on a Friday night, and it's a lot of men that you got to compete with in order to meet just one female, So here in San Jose, right, we have a nickname for the city. It's not necessarily San Jose, but it's Man Jose, because it's just full of men no matter where you go on a Friday, Saturday night, and it's extremely, extremely difficult to find people.
Joe, you were going to jump in there when I said, does anybody not want to get married?
I mean, I've been divorced, so it was a mess, really. There's another way to put that. I don't really see marriage as a necessary thing. I don't think anybody needs to do it. I think if you want to do it and you get to define the contract in whatever way you want, go for it. But I personally don't really see the point. I don't think it disproves anything that's happening or not happening in a relationship anyways.
Wait, you don't think marriage proves or say that again? The last part.
I don't think it confirms or disproves anything that's happening in a relationship already. I think it's typically fairly loaded. It doesn't always have to be, but I think it's typically fairly loaded. And most of the people that I know who've had successful marriages, I don't think the actual marriage part of it has been that helpful to them. If anything, it's been a little bit of a struggle dealing with that aspect or the expectations around it.
Really? So you see it as a negative albatross? So what about
as an economic contract? Yeah, I think I can tell you why. I think as an economic contract, it typically sets up expectations between people that are really not necessarily fair or realistic. I mean, traditionally, as an economic contract, particularly for women who were sort of, unfortunately, in marriage situations, given a lot less opportunity, ability, power, empowerment. But in general, the idea that you would tie all of your economic worth to somebody and perhaps some of your individual capability as a human being to experience the world, I think that's a really kind of something to be really careful about. I don't think it's not like it doesn't work at all. I'm just saying I don't know that it's that helpful really when you put on that commitment and you do all of that stuff that's in the traditional contract. I think it's troubling at times.
Okay, so I totally get it, because when I got divorced after 2 years, it cost me $100,000, right? I couldn't get it back. It was just the way it was because I was the one with the money, and it wasn't an unfair, horrible divorce. It was just the way it was. So believe me, I know I may never get married again after that. But I want to ask you guys, the people who say that they want to get married someday, what do you say to what Joe said about the negative? It is. I mean, it's definitely. You sense a lack of a certain type of freedom, and I don't mean about commitment. I'm within the relationship. I mean about life choices and decisions you can make. Obviously, you're interdependent with somebody else. But does somebody want to respond to what Joe said?
Amy, I think you brought up a really interesting point about the lack of options that committing to a relationship can come to. A lot of times when they talk about millennial relationships, they talk about a fear of missing out and how they think that this relates back to the supposed hookup culture that we're all involved in all the time. And I definitely have thought about that before. I don't know if I want to get married ever. I know that I would rather I'd rather not get married than get married to the wrong person that's going to, not jive with the way that I want to live. And I know that I also agree with Hesse that for me, it's not necessarily forever. It's not something to be gone into life. I wouldn't stay in a marriage just because of the concept that it's supposed to be forever. And for me, it is a real consideration of what if it is the wrong person? What if I am missing out, not on Mr. Right, but on Mr. Better? And I sometimes wonder if that's debilitating for other people, because I definitely feel a strain on me in dating. I
honestly think social media amplifies that, not just in the relationships, but I wonder its impact on marriage, because there's always someone else. There's always someone else. I'm actually going through that now. Next. But I know Judy's background, obviously. We have the same father who was married 3 times. Anyway, I would love to know what your parents' background are. We talking about it in the chat. If you feel like volunteering at since this is a primarily marriage optimistic group we have here, right? Other than Joe, and I'm probably with Joe. I'd like to know. I mean, I know you're chatting about it, but Albert, your parents were married for a long time, right?
Yeah. My parents have been together for 37 years. So they got married in, I guess, 1977. Then my dad came to the United States in 1980. Then my mother followed a couple years later, and they both did grad school at different schools, and they were across continents from each other too. So my dad was all the way out in Michigan for a couple years, while my mother was still in China, doing her education as well. And then so after 7 years, my dad was here, and 3 years of my mother, they decided that they wanted to have children. So it was a very, I would say, it was kind of like one of those step-by-step, do one thing after another kind of processes. And so I don't think I will have something like that growing up here in the United States and where I am now. A 37-year marriage is something that's like wow to me. And then I would also say...
Really, wait, I gotta stop. So you believe in marriage, right?
I've never experienced marriage. I have no idea what goes into that.
You defined it as something that I actually thought was romantic in a way I didn't expect from you, considering what you said in the first. The reason Albert inspired this because he came on talking about how bad the idea of marriage is, and I'm watching Samantha's face because she's married during that hangout. But you defined it as a fairly romantic thing. You probably use more romantic terminology than anyone else on this panel.
Except let it be known that there's a caveat to the whole thing, is that I've not experienced what most of probably this rest of this group has experienced. I've only had one relationship. It was a very toxic 5-year relationship. And so as far as the baseline is concerned, marriage is commitment, but what else comes after that is something that's completely anonymous to me, and I don't think I can actually say what...
Wait, Albert. Even though you watched growing up what
Sure.
A lot of people would consider a successful marriage because it stayed together.
Yeah, but I mean the other thing with Asian parents is, and no disrespect to my parents at all if they ever come across this, is that Asian families tend to also be very unemotional in the experience. It's just that it's very much the team aspect that we've been discussing here on and off, and my parents have done that very well for 37 years. It's a very supportive marriage, and I mean, I don't ever really see their emotions, and so the way that I see my marriage, if I get married, is going to be very, very different from I think what they experience. And so whatever lessons they impart on me are probably going to be a heck of a lot different. And so, I mean, yeah, I have a very glossy-eyed, oh, dreamy, idealistic view of marriage, but it's also because I'm not really quite sure what a Western, marriage is. I think I'm still trying to discover and define my identity as a first generation American-born Chinese person in this country, because all the things that I'm going to learn are things that my parents have never known about. And it just really occurred to me this like maybe 2 to 3 years ago, because my parents have everything that I did for the first time in the United States was also a first time for my parents too, and so they were flying by the seat of their pants. And so I think my marriage will also be a flight by the seat of my pants too.
Well, I understand if that's a toxic 5-year relationship. I kind of get it too, because our personal experiences impact. So, okay, Hesse, you're first generation born in the U.S., right?
Kinda. I was here when I was like 2.
Oh,
but I mean, I can say that the
not U.S. Sorry, Canada. Sorry,
Canada,
that was
no,
so incredibly ethnocentric of me. Sorry.
That's okay. And we're lumping Asians together, so that's fine too.
Well, I didn't say you were Asian because I don't know if Filipinos are Asian. I get that whole thing confused.
Well, yeah, I know.
They're very Asian. Yeah.
We're very Asian.
We have smaller than I would think it is because you smile when Albert talks about Asian families. But wait, so Samantha, are you first generation, or were your parents born here?
My dad was born here. My mom wasn't.
Okay.
My dad was the first one in our family to be born here.
In Canada, I get it. So does any of what Albert said about it kind of sounds like a great business deal, your parents' marriage in a way, Albert? That's probably the wrong terminology, but it works. It just may not be. I mean, I don't know if any marriage is romantic with a capital.
I mean, I don't know. What can I say? I mean, I don't live at home. I haven't done so for the last 3 years. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they've begun dating again. They go out to the movies on Saturday night, and my sister and I find that totally cute.
Yeah.
I feel like when I look at my parents, my mom, from the earliest memories I have of my mom is may you be cursed with a husband like your dad. Literally would say that. And
Yikes.
honestly, my parents are probably what you would call the fairy tale family.
They are. They love each other.
How are they a fairy tale family if she's saying that?
She was facetious, but
I'm joking. May you be cursed with a good marriage.
So I want to ask Judy something, because she doesn't remember our father, but her mother was my dad's third wife, but she was totally in love with our father. He walked on water, right, Judy? Every story you ever heard about your dad from her was that he was gorgeous and charming and perfect, right?
Oh yeah, he was a golden god to her. But
does that impact? Oh, I can't hear you now. Damn it, I want to hear this. Can you, Jude, talk so I can see? Jude, does that? Yes. Does that glorification of marriage impact your view of it?
That's actually a really interesting question, Amy, because when I was little, I think I thought about it as, in those terms that you would get married and it would be perfect, but obviously their relationship wasn't perfect because he died when they had been together for only 3 or 4 years. But the flip side of it is, because I didn't know him, I never kind of used my dad as a male role model. My brothers and my uncles were more of what I thought that a man or a husband was supposed to be like. So when I think of marriage, I think of my Uncle Rick and my Aunt Marilyn, who have been together for 30-some years, have 3 kids, and just got a dog the other day. They're the happiest people I have ever met in a relationship, and that's really what I aim for, but I think they're really realistic, too.
But you still aren't optimistic about marriage and don't think you may ever want to get married?
I think there's a difference between wanting to get married and finding the right person to get married to. I don't think that it's a terrible institution. I'm not one of those people that's going to go around going, oh, it's awful and it creates only misery. No, I mean, it could be. I am more afraid of choosing the wrong person than of not ever being married.
Okay.
I totally agree with that. I have that same perspective. It's more of a fear of choosing the wrong person, although I'd like to be married to find that right person. And my parents have been married for 40 years, and I'd echo Samantha in saying that I think they have, like, as realistic to a fairy tale relationship as you could have.
Well, if I was married to Joe, right? That's her dad.
Exactly. Amy knows Joe. Joe's amazing. Yeah.
Let me back you guys up. Let me back you up because I just heard something from both Judy and Laura that I don't understand and I'm curious about. What is the right person? Like, what? How do you define that? I don't know what that means.
So for me, it's a person that makes me a better person. So there's personalities. I mean, it's same in any type of relationship, like friendships or whatnot. Like there's personalities that complement you and like make you stronger and make you a better, like the better version of you. And so that's definitely, and it's something more internal that you feel or you see in yourself, I think. But for me, that's that right person, is somebody that makes me a better version of me.
Joe? Sorry, go ahead, Jude.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Joe. I kind of have been viewing my long-term relationships up to this point kind of as trying people on, not with the goal of necessarily marrying one of them, but as I date people and as I get older, I learn what works better for me as who I am now versus who I was when I was 20. And for me, the right person, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm getting a better idea as time goes on. And if I meet them, that's fabulous. And if I don't, I'm not going to force myself to get married because everybody says I should go buy a big white dress and waste a bunch of money one day.
100% agree. That is exactly how I feel. Yeah. And like throughout, dating is like this testing process of figuring out who works for you and who doesn't. And so like back to what Albert said, I think people should date a lot because it lets you know, like, it lets you filter out.
Okay. I'm going to jump to Brian. I'm going to jump to Brian on that.
Okay, go.
He obviously couldn't have dated a lot unless he was a total Mac Daddy in high school. So tell me about not having that fear of missing out or the fear that the next person might be better, and because you're making something work. You seem happy when you talk about it.
No, and I am, but I don't think I ever was looking for the right person. For me, I can't figure out what I want for tomorrow most of the time. So to me, the idea of the right person isn't really what I was focusing on. I was focusing on who was making me better today and who could make me better tomorrow. So for me, I got married right out of college. We had 5 years of traveling the world. I had a great job that was traveling the world, and then I had kids. And my 3 daughters are my world. There's nothing in my life that could be better than when I had kids. But our marriage, my kids don't make my marriage better. My kids make my life better. And my happiness, or the word romance that you talked about, is when I come home and my daughters say how much fun they had with their mom and my wife. That is the happiness to me that was equal to romance before kids. So I guess I look at it for me, it's right for what I decided to do when I was 22 or 23 years old. Now that I'm 33, if I was looking for the right person, I don't know if I would have picked the same person that's made me happy for 11 years.
Okay, so let's move to kids then, because this is something interesting to me. Just with a show of hands, who wants to have kids besides Brian? That's it. Joe wants to have kids. Okay. So everybody wants to have kids, except Tassie and me. Oh, Laura does not.
Well, I said maybe because I look at kids as a 250, and I don't know how much it'd be adjusted for inflation, $300,000 investment over 18 years.
More than that, buddy. It's like $1 million. Seriously, you better work.
Exactly. So, I mean, my thing with that is just, okay, so do I want to wake up early, in the morning and deal with them crying? Do I want to send them off to school where shootings are happening all the time now? Do I want to do it in this country even? Because, we're entering a very toxic state in this country. I know I'm not going to get into politics, but, it's the money aspect, right? And a house costs a lot in Silicon Valley.
Right, so I would rather give up my house any day I would rent, and I am renting now. I sold a really nice house that I bought so I could make a drastic jump from my career life to a startup life and take a major pay cut because I wanted to rent. But for me, I don't look. And I use a quote from one of my favorite movies, Heat. You could get killed walking your dog. So I don't worry about sending my kids to school because life happens on that side. But like the investment is and I might be still in the honeymoon phase. I have they're under 5 years.
11 years, you rock on if you're in the honeymoon phase after 11 years. I'm loving it.
But I mean, like for me, I always wanted to have kids, and what I like about every single day is I try to make my kids' life better, and to me that gives me more motivation than anything. I mean, even more motivation than being successful in my career.
Okay, you're in Phoenix, Albert. You need to go on vacation and visit Brian. Okay.
Yeah, maybe there's some man time there that he can set me straight.
No, just to be around a little Joy, because I think the Valley.
Well, I mean, I don't mind being around kids. All my relatives are all my cousins and aunts and uncles are having kids now, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I see them for 2 hours and then they're done. But having one around you all day long and then having to pay for the food, the school, the field trips, the insurance, the healthcare.
Don't have kids, Albert. Don't have kids.
All right, the food is a deal, but I mean, if you want to give your kids the best childhood ever, or a childhood that's really, really productive like mine did, there's a lot of summer camps involved. There's a lot of extracurricular activities involved, which I wouldn't be against paying. It's just that I'm not the income level yet where I think I feel comfortable doing that for a child.
This is
where I want my child to be able to go to a really good college 18 to 19 years down the line. And
right, if you're waiting for the one and you're waiting for to have enough money to have kids, you'll never be at that spot. Because I still don't make enough money to have for me, I sacrifice, and kids aren't easy, so I will not. No. I mean, especially I have one, they're 16 months apart, and I have an 8-month-old running around or trying to run around my house right now. But I think there's an element of it where I don't think less of anybody, and millennial, no matter their age, if they have kids when they're not married. And I don't think of anyone less of them if they've been together with someone for 11 years and not been married. So for me, the ideal of either one should not be linked. That's why I asked the question in the chat, because when I got married, I wanted to have kids, but I proposed literally when I was on my knee. It said, let's promise to not have kids for 5 years, because I wanted to enjoy life together before we made that step into puke diapers and a lot of money.
Okay. Go ahead, Laura.
What's interesting about that, Brian, is that my parents waited 7 years to have me, and they say it's the best decision that they made for their relationship, because my
parents waited 10, so
yeah, they had that that time together.
My dad was 41 when he had me, and I think 42 or 43 when my sister was born. So
wait, guys. So I want to go back to this. So what Brian just said. Does anybody not concur with that concept that marriage is one thing? He doesn't judge anyone who has children outside of marriage. Does anybody? Because Tiffany brought something up in the chat that's a little touchy culturally, but I think it's really important, because your generation is known as rejecting establishment and institutions that existed before. Although the boomers were known for the same thing, so I don't know how long lasting that will be. But is religion? There are things going on in the chat where a lot of people are saying their Christian friends got married because they weren't going to have sex outside of marriage, or maybe not just Christian, religious friends. So does anybody want to weigh in on that and how important that is to them, or not, or what their peers think?
Well, I mean, I can weigh in from a Catholic. So I got married in a Catholic church to appease my Catholic parents. But I didn't get married because of that. Where I had my wedding was appeasing the religious side of my world. And if we went back to do it again, it would have been on a beach like we had the reception. But I grew up in a Catholic church that by the time I was 16, I had my own beliefs in, or disbeliefs in, whichever you take that. So for me, religion was something that, the act of marriage was committing. And I didn't say, it's not the whole idea of forever and the kids are forever. Or kids are at least 18 years, I guess. On that aspect of it. But for me, the religious aspect was the checkbox that it had to be in a Catholic church and it had to go through all of those hoops that I needed to back then. But there's also the sense today where we reject establishment, but I don't know if we reject the idea of tradition, which I think are two different things that is often.
No, I do. Tiffany, I want to hear from you on this, because you're being quiet this week, and I want to hear what you think. Tiffany's is a wise observer. What does that mean to you? Because you brought it up. And what does it mean to your peers, too? Because you did say you have a lot of conservative friends who wouldn't come on a hangout type of situation because some of their views aren't necessarily cool in the millennial generation. So tell me what you think or what your peers think about religion and how it impacts your view of marriage.
I'll start with the caveat that I'm a preacher's kid. So that definitely strongly impacts kind of just my overall background. But I know a lot of people that were wanting to wait to marriage and didn't necessarily, but more than waiting to engage someone in a biblical way, I know more people that are wanting to wait to have children with someone until they are married. That they can see dating and living together and common law or whatever and however long they're together as something that they can accept, and it's not a big deal to not be married. But if they see this person as the mother or father of their children, that they would want to be married. Again, that's not a requirement for everyone, but that is actually more of an issue for a lot of my friends necessarily than just getting married. It's kind of taking that next step and maybe signing a contract, or like in my case, I live in Texas now, but my family's not here, and my long-term boyfriend's family, they never meet. So again, if we got married, that might be the first time that our families actually unite. Not to say that we couldn't plan it, but we're too big and we're too spread out, so I can't necessarily say that I can guarantee there's going to be other occasions, because it's not like it was with our grandparents who lived in the same town and everyone knew everyone. You don't necessarily always have that safety net because so many of us are so far away from home or that close tie. So I completely agree with what everyone is saying, but I want to be married and I want to have children eventually, and I'm not personally thrown off by all of the awful things. In my family, my parents realized that they were not meant to be together, the two of them, in divorce, but both have been in successful second marriages for over 25 years. So I understand the negative parts and when things aren't a good fit and all of the stats and having most of my friends have parents that either were divorced or never married in the first place. But I've also seen really successful marriages and see the strength that can provide for some people. Like my great-grandparents, for instance, I know I'm talking a lot, so I'll shut up in a minute, but my great-grandparents were married for decades. And, when they married, it was maybe more of a contractual kind of thing, but that was a partnership more than I've seen a lot of millennials, because it was true. They were in it together, and if it was a hard time through the Great Depression, they were in it together. They weren't going to get divorced because they decided it was too hard. And I'm not blaming millennials and Gen X and boomers for doing that, but I definitely have seen kind of the grit and staying power is not necessarily a value because we want to be happy.
But you know what, too, Tiffany? I'll tell you this. My grandparents raised me. My grandmother did before I went away to school, and they had 53 years of one of the most horrific marriages I could ever witness. She said she loved him, but they just yelled and cursed. I learned every curse word I know before I could even, I don't remember not knowing some of these horrible words. And so I always think, God, if my grandmother had the opportunity to get divorced, and what she would have done. I think we romanticize what it was like then too.
I think, but I don't think, maybe when they got married, but I don't know any of the older folks that I've talked to about marriage that romanticize it. It was actually much less. I hear more.
No, but I don't mean romanticize it as in, because my grandfather was stunningly handsome. I'm sure my grandmother was madly in love with him when she had premarital sex with him, which when I discovered that was amazing, because she was pregnant when she got married. But I'm talking about romanticize with a capital R, this idea of stick-togetherness. Because a lot of stick-togetherness, especially for women, was trapped. That wasn't,
Yeah. But what about now? I mean, if everything, and I'm not again saying that anyone that thinks things should be reevaluated on a regular basis is wrong, because I think that's true, and I think the ability for men and women to pursue divorces when they're in really unhappy marriages is a good thing. But my fear is I see so many people marry because it's fun. And then they realize.
But do you see that now?
Because of the work that needed to be done. I still see it now.
I agree with that. Yeah,
Okay.
completely. I think people like they're both marriage and I mean a lot of things, marriage, having kids, whatnot. It's sort of taken on kind of lightheartedly, and I don't think a lot of times. Not, I think you see a really big divide. You see people like in this group that almost like think it through to an extreme and are like very, very selective. But then you see a lot of people that are just like, no, I'll get married, I can get divorced, not a big deal, and it's kind of flippant. And so I think it's interesting because you see a real like sector divide of.
I know you guys are probably smarter than the average bears, across the board, but I'm not hearing that from you guys. I'm not hearing anybody take marriage in a flippant way.
Have you seen the movie? Sorry, Samantha, but have you guys seen the movie Idiocracy?
No.
I always refer back to that movie because it's really interesting. I'm 33, and most of my close friends are right around my age, are just getting married. A few are just having kids. I don't want kids. And what happens is like the people that are more educated get married later, have fewer kids, whereas the people that tend to be less educated often will, and this is a bold stereotype, but you see this in different sectors.
True. It's
tend to get married earlier and have more kids, and so it's a really interesting divide that you see, and I think you see that in a lot of different ways across the board. And then of course there's anomalies like Brian, who got married early, has kids, but is very educated and responsible and whatnot. So it's interesting.
I think like when I think of myself, which is like I've only been married a couple of months now, 3 months, 4 months, something like that.
Is that good?
No, I think like for me, I've known Justin a very long time. I've known my partner for a very long time, so it just like it molded into my life. But for me, on my mom's side, the oldest person who got married was 20. So for me, my cousins pressured me to get married very early, and I was actually engaged before I got married to my husband, and I called it off because I was like, no, my cousins have forced me into thinking that I need to get married now, and this is what happens, and it was not the right person, and luckily I didn't lose any money. So I think like we need to also create spaces for those people who are like as Laura was saying, like well educated, and like to give those spaces to make sure that they also think that through, that sometimes, especially coming from like a family of like immigrant people, like to push back on that. But I think we also don't give the space to discuss what a toxic relationship is to a certain extent that we should.
Well, and I think that's also if we look at the change. My grandparents, they both passed away last year within a month of each other. And it was literally my grandmother gave up when my grandfather passed away. She had not spent one night until the day he died away from him since they got married. That is not today's society. And so to hold ourselves to the what they thought was a successful or a happy marriage, which I don't know if they were happy every day, is not what I focused on. And like my parents are still married. They got married at 19 and 23 years old. They have 3 sons. But what I focused on in marriage was, I've seen successful marriage, I've seen unsuccessful, but I don't hold myself to anything from that time because I don't think of today being anywhere close to what that was. Like my grandmother never drove, never had a driver's license, married 60 plus years. And like my wife is a school teacher, has 2 master's degree, better educated than me, smarter than me, could easily make more money than me in what she does. And that makes me just as happy as it did my grandfather who had my grandmother who didn't drive. So I think it's like, to me, that's part of the whole section, is that we can't compare ourselves to even our parents when it comes to what happiness. Because I focus really on happiness for right now and my children, not on the idea of when I die, that I die a month after my my spouse because I made it that way.
And like my parents. Sorry, Joe. Go, Joe.
No, I have a very quick thing. Is like I think this is a bigger level thing, and I've gone back to what I thought when I was like 15, really, which is weird, to be totally honest with you. Where I had this sort of thought in my head of like, really, if you're going to spend a long time with somebody, you should just wake up one morning and go, oh yeah, that was a pretty good 20 years. You should be caring about the enterprise as you build it. But I think that, particularly to what Brian's doing really well, it sounds like, and what I think is kind of cool is, he has an imagination about what he might be as a human, what his partner might be, and what they might be together. And I'll just list off a few possibilities when you're looking at like going down the route of kids or marriage. You could get a civil union, you could get married, you could not get married and write your own contract, you could write your own economic contract, you could have a kid by yourself, you could adopt a kid, you could get a sperm donor. I won't even go into it, but like, there's so many ways.
But you know what you can't do? You know what you can't do, Joe? And this is where I think this is where it's grounded, is you can't protect your partner financially. So, and we can talk about gay marriage, but in Florida, you still cannot get married. And I have friends who've been together for many, many years, and she has more money. One has more money than the other. They own the house together, but they live in constant fear that, God forbid anything happens, I'm not protected. And the same is true as heterosexuals. I mean, unless you have common law, which a lot of states do not. And I think that is the thing that really makes marriage still valuable to many people who are being pragmatic. Because you can do all those things. It's very cool until you spend a lifetime together and you own a home and you have all sorts of assets that the U.S. government's going to take half of or more because you're not married.
I wonder what people think of that. That's a good point.
And I wonder if like the pragmatic approach is what we're worried about. I mean, I have 3 master's student loans that I'm paying off. That like when my wife went to get her master's degree, the second master's degree, I didn't think about the financial burden of that master's degree as a high school teacher who, I have almost more in student loans than she makes in a month. But yet I knew that, like that's what she wanted to do for her happiness, for her what she likes. So I don't know if
Right? Wait, you guys, I want to say a couple things that came through the chat because I think we lost Brian. Samantha said, I love this quote, "Forever is bullshit. It takes work. It takes work, and you should be able to renegotiate as needed," right? And Samantha, you said in the chat that you have a monthly renegotiation of a contract?
So, like, because both of my husband and I were previously engaged, and he actually lost a lot of money, like a lot of money, because they called it off 2 weeks before, and I called mine off like months before. We openly discuss things like I'm in a graduate program. I know my education is going to cost a lot, so we discuss like what does this mean for some of our wants and goals? Where do we want to live?
Do you ever discuss that maybe it won't be forever?
Yes. And I mean, both of us came into this marriage knowing that if we didn't think it was going to work, we would just call it off. Because we've done that before and we knew we were comfortable doing it again. But I think the difference is that because we're so pragmatic about it and because we understand the economic stability, like I have benefits for the first time. I got benefits because he's got benefits in his job. Like I can go to the massage therapist if I want. So like we talk about
in Canada, if you have benefits, you can go to the massage therapist. Jeez, I'm moving, Hessie. I'm coming up.
Yeah, if you have a job and with an employer that gives you benefits, but it's your marriage
not my employer. My employer blows when it comes to bennies.
But he works at a university, and like both of us have always talked. Like our first romantic conversation was about the economic principles of marriage. I shit you not. That's what our first conversation was about.
I just want to say that sounds pretty hot. All right, I'm going to go back on mute.
Okay, Joe made another. I love Albert. Okay, Joe made another comment in the chat that I had to bring up. He said time doesn't equal success when we were talking about length of marriages in previous generations. Does anybody disagree with that? I mean, I have to say that when I meet someone who's been married for 40 years, or they couldn't be, but anybody my generation who's been married for 25 years. I have to say, part of me goes, damn, I do admire that because I know how hard it is. I mean, but obviously I'll never be married for 50 years unless I get married tomorrow and live till I'm 96. But do you guys see time? Is length of marriage success at all to you? Really?
Length of happy marriage. I mean, if someone I met and I don't think they're happy, and they told me like they're not happy as in their life as happy as, and they've told me they've been married for a long time, I pity them rather than feel respected to them, and that's just my way of looking at it. Because if I mean, life is short. We all know. I mean, that's not something that is a surprise to too many people. But the length does not always equal what you wanted in life, and we all don't know what we want in life. But for me, if every day is happier than the next day, yes, my 11 years has been great. But if 8 of those 11 years has been, were horrible, don't congratulate me on that.
Great. So, okay, so say you have 11, say you have 20 great years, Brian, and then in 21 years, you're not feeling it. In 22 years, it's getting worse until it's dry, you've grown apart, and you get divorced. Was it still a successful marriage?
I would blame the success. I would say that the success was the 19 or 20 happy years, yes. And for me, a lot of it has to do with, I mean, like, I think of it a little bit different, but like my kids are my world. So, if I'm able to, I don't associate me having to stay married to keep my kids happy, if that makes sense. So for me, it's the fact that, like, my wife and I have 3 kids, and whatever we have to do to keep them happy, to focus and along with my life being happy, but my life has a lot to do with them being happy, then I'm okay with that. If it's 21 years and we decide it's not the right step, but I don't know. I look at it very much in a happiness side. I mean, I worked the successful side of my career and became very successful in what someone would look at as a resume, and I was not happy. And I quickly ejected from that button, and ever since then I plan on doing that in everything in my life.
One thing I want to add, and just following what Brian had said, like there is an old adage about the reason that people get married is to have kids, right? Even from the Bible, about creation, right? And so at the end of the day, is it really about the happiness, or is it really to populate this earth?
Well, but we talked about that, whether you have to be married to have children, and it doesn't sound like a lot of these millennials, a lot of the panel thinks that it's essential.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But that's a societal, a cultural mandate.
I have a baby daddy, and it took me a long time. Like I didn't marry him intentionally, but I definitely had a really hard time even knowing what to call him, because there was the little Catholic girl in me that was still like, ooh. I mean, even though I made the choice, and I don't know that that's the same now. It's only 7 years later. Is there a stigma at all, not maybe amongst you, but amongst society, about babies born out of wedlock?
I think it's an age thing now more than it is I think if you have kids younger, where it's a little bit more of a judge, just in my view, because I don't think of someone out of wedlock not being a fit mother or dad to raise a child. So why, like if that's how they chose or that's how their life rolled, I don't judge that side. Now, making the wrong decision at a younger age, I think that's where this generation still slightly judge. But
okay.
I mean, I think that's changed, thankfully, because I don't think saying that you have a baby daddy or you have someone else's, that you're not married to today, was the father of your child. I don't judge at all across the board for that.
Okay.
And I want to say on the flip side really quick, I think there's also a lot of judgment against people that don't have kids or don't want kids. So there's judgment on both sides.
Absolutely. I mean,
it's harsh. It's really harsh.
It's many years I didn't want children. I mean, into my 30s. And I got it constantly, except from the one boss who kept telling me not to get pregnant. It is definitely a stigma that's still there, because especially not if you're a man, but if you're a woman, it's like there's something unnatural about it.
Other women don't like you. They don't want to hang out with you. Like it just depends. But there's.
I'm telling you, Laura, when I got pregnant, it's the president.
Oh no, yeah, you're right.
The president of my company started to treat me like I was more human because I was pregnant. Like, oh, maybe she does have a heart, So that's something we should.
It's so
explore.
true.
Yeah.
Amy, there's one thing I want to say.
Yeah, go, Tiffany.
Because I know we're running short. I think I agree there's a stigma on both sides, and I think definitely for those that are choosing to have children outside of marriage, or a situation happens and they have children outside of marriage, whatever their life is more acceptable than it has been in the past. But I also think there's people like me that want to be married and want to have children at some point. And the biggest thing for me is I want to have a child with someone that I want to be the father of my children. And marriage is not a requirement for that, but that would be, if that's the person that I want to spend at least 18 years with raising a child, and I trust them for that, and I love them, I would also want to be able to consider that person my husband. It's not that that any other way is wrong, but I don't think that there's that all millennials have decided that they can do one or the other separately. I think there are still many that would like it as a package deal. It's just not an assumption that it has to be, or that the woman would quit her job to stay at home. If that's the choice that couple makes, then excellent. And if it's not, there's many more options. But I don't think because we've had so many diverse options, we've completely lost any desire for what was traditional.
Okay. All right. So I have to wrap up because it's 9 o'clock, and as I expected, lots of people had lots to say, but you're all very well behaved today. Everybody got to talk. We're definitely going to do a round 2 of this. I think we might do it for next week. We have music on the schedule, Joe, but I think I'm going to do this one because what I want to explore that we haven't is I want to get into friendships and digital relationships a little bit as well, not simply marriage and romantic relationships. And as you know, Joe and I are actually writing a book together on it, so we'll just pick your brains and then write the book. No, but I think that, you know, I've been thinking a lot about digital relationships and what they mean, and also friendship and can women and men be friends and so on. There's so many questions we haven't tackled yet. So if you all want to return next week, let me know. And otherwise, thanks everybody for watching. Hang on if you want to stay and chat. I'm going to take us off the air. Good hangout, guys. Thanks.